On today's show, the Dallas Mavericks have to make adjustments between Game 1 and Game 2 against the Thunder. We'll tell you what those adjustments have to be on today's Locked On Mavs.
Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks.
Mavericks, NBA champions. It's good, and the Mavericks have won the game.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Loyalty never fades away.
Welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager from Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show, making Locked On Mavs your first listen today, where the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day on any podcast platform, like the video on YouTube, and comment anything below on the video on YouTube. Let us know what's one thing that has to change between Game 1 and Game 2 of the Mavs series against the Thunder. And Game Off. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting friends. Download Monopoly Go on the App Store or Google Play. And joining me, he was joining me earlier today. We had dinner, and then we decided to do a podcast in our separate hotels from The Athletic. What you got for me, Tim Cato?
We just talked a lot about how that shelf behind you was really empty. And so
we filled it.
I was just like, I'm in my own hotel room, and I'm like, what do you have in your hotel room that you can put up there? For people listening just on audio, Nick has, his hotel just has this shelf. Just this very
empty,
barren shelf behind. So you now have two shoes, a Mavs hat.
There you go. It has a Mavs logo on it in some way.
It's like, I feel, no, I'm going to say it. I feel self-conscious that all of these podcasters have this elaborate setup of their backdrop. And anybody who's ever seen me on a video podcast knows that I have just like a window. It's because of where my desk is set up in my apartment. It's a loft apartment, so I don't have a wall behind me. There's nowhere I could set up my desk where there's like a wall to put like, I was going to say paraphernalia, but that like it has a very specific drug connotation, I feel like.
I mean, you could put that up there too. That's up to you. It's whatever brand you want to put off on your show.
Well, we wouldn't get YouTube ad revenue.
Yeah, you have to check the different box when you do that if you decide to put that up. But yeah, I decided a long time ago, I'm going to put two shelves up, put my entire childhood and all Mavs paraphernalia that I have. Like everything that I own that's Mavs is on that shelf at home. But here we are. We're in OKC. We're in separate hotels here in this city that is maybe a real city and maybe is not. Maybe it's just a front for casinos. I don't know at this point, having been here. But today we're going to talk about things that absolutely have to change for the Mavericks from Game 1 to Game 2. And so we're going to talk about some things that we saw in Game 1. And let's start with this. The things that absolutely have to change for the Mavericks. One of the things that really stood out to me watching that game again was 15 turnovers. OKC had 22 points off of those turnovers, and it felt like everybody had an extra turnover. It's like Lively had 2, Luka had 5, he usually gets 4, Kyrie had 4, he usually gets like 2. It's like everyone had an extra turnover. The Mavs had an 18% turnover rate, which is the 9th percentile, which is very, very low, like awful turnover rate. And it felt like that's one of the things. The Mavericks had a really casual start to the game. There's a couple of weird turnovers here and there. And like that has to change from Game 1 to Game 2.
Oklahoma City is a team that's going to turn you over, and they're going to turn you over legitimately. They're going to get some turnovers just because they're very good at doing that. That one play where Lou Dort dove to the ground. I can't remember who I was talking to. Somebody said that was actually a kickball that just wasn't called in the mix of that. But these are players who are very good. They're very good at getting steals. They're very talented. They are going to harass you. They're very physical. They're very athletic. Maybe they've got a reputation that, they're going to get away with a play like that or two. And so when I look at this team and I look at a team that is very good at committing, forcing turnovers, and I look at the Mavericks, who are a team very good at not committing turnovers, I look at all of the unnecessary ones and I say, that's an issue. That's a problem. I think back to, was it the very first one of the game? There was a Kyrie one where you just tried to hit Gafford on an inbounds pass, and the communication was off. The pass, just skitters into the baseline. There were several alley-oops that were just, ambitious at best, and they ended up as turnovers. Those were not good plays. And I thought, I'm sure we're going to get into this, I thought the offense was okay at times. I thought some of the execution was able to be there. You can't be having those unforced errors because the Thunder are the best 3-point shooting team in the NBA. Dallas is not. They have to make it up somewhere else, whether it's offensive rebounding or just having more possessions because you're not turning it over. You have to do it somehow. Turnovers was one way that they just did not kind of make up that efficiency difference on Tuesday.
And the Thunder spend the most time of any team in transition. It's like 20% of the time in transition that they spend according to Synergy. And so you can't just give them those extra possessions. And so early, the casual start, that's the thing that can't be the same from game 1 to game 2. The casualness of you had that Luka turnover where it was actually Kyrie passing to Luka where Lu Dort just got the ball and it was an immediate transition possession. Kyrie had a turnover early in the first quarter where he was just dribbling and just turned it over. It's like, when does that ever happen? But it happened in that game. You had the Luka entry pass to Gafford where he had Giddey on him, and so Luka immediately recognized that, threw it to Gafford in the post, but then Chet came over and messed it up, and then it was a turnover. And then Kyrie had another turnover in the first quarter. It's like all those little things that just don't happen. They can't happen in the next game. And so those turnovers, you can't just give OKC extra possessions like you mentioned, or else they're just going to turn them over into like really big plays. I think another thing that cannot happen in game 2, PJ Washington getting into foul trouble. This was something that I think really messed them up early on. He is just such an indispensable player, and it's kind of wild to see how indispensable he's become since they brought him into that trade, and then all of a sudden you're like, man, like you can't sit this guy very often. He got the foul against the Jalen Williams charge where he was like kind of on the move. It's like kind of a questionable call, but that was about halfway through the first quarter. Then he had another one where it was a bump foul against SGA where he was trying to stop the ball in transition. He kind of earned that one. He just wanted to stop in transition. And then he had another one after he sat for a little while. Second quarter, 8:15 left in the quarter. He had his third foul on another transition play where he tried to stop it. So like the stopping the turnovers turns right into PJ Washington fouls because he's trying to stop the Thunder in transition. But like PJ Washington getting into foul trouble, that has to change from game 1 to game 2.
I saw a tweet, I think it was sent Tuesday, and it said something to the effect of, if an NBA player gets a foul, they shouldn't play the rest of the game. Maybe they shouldn't play in the league again. If you're not willing to step onto the court and abide by the rules of the game, then honestly, what are we doing here? So that's my only point.
Do you think I don't think Kid does this very often, but like there are coaches that like take their players out when you're like, okay, you fouled them out of the game yourself and you didn't let them get a chance. I feel like Kid doesn't do that often, but like first half, it depends on how many you get and how quickly you get. I feel like it takes some people out. And by the second half, it was like, oh man, PJ just didn't play enough in the first half. I think, what did he play? Like 9 first half minutes in this game. It just wasn't enough for them. And then they got that deficit in the second quarter, and it ended up really affecting the game.
This is an obvious point, but the reason you take a player out when they get fouls, I do think that coaches should be more liberal with the way that they keep key players in who they need in a series, especially once you get to the postseason. I think that that's something that is, especially in the postseason, is necessary. That if you need that player out there, just keep them in. But the reason coaches take them out is that they're going to play differently. They're especially a defensive player like PJ Washington. He is the team's now that Maxey is out of the series, possibly out of the playoffs. Maxey was the guy who was the low man rotating over to the rim, stopping a lot of these drives. That's PJ's responsibility. Out of everybody on the team, he is honestly the only like for like. He's not a like for like. He's not a perfect replacement. There's really no replacement for what Maxey brings to this team. PJ is the closest thing to it. And if he isn't going to play as aggressively, if he can't play as aggressively, that's the reason you take him out. Not because, you don't trust him or anything. It's because he has to play differently. And so, take him out, reset, bring him back in when he feels like he can play like the player that you're used to him being again. Can't get in foul trouble. I agree with you.
Yeah, that's the point, is that they need him to be that version of PJ. They need him to be the aggressive defender. They need him to be the guy that tries on offense and that can, put the ball on the deck and put a little floater up like he did a couple times in the Thunder game. They need that version of PJ Washington. And so that's why that can't happen from game 1 to game 2. There's a bunch of other things that can't happen from game 1 to game 2. The 3-point shooting, I feel like will kind of correct a little bit. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about Kyrie. He had a couple of thoughts after the game. We'll hear from him and talk about those things that have to change from game 1 to game 2 coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. So, wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place? With Yahoo Finance, you can do that. Consolidate all of your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis that you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. So, you want to grow your portfolio, you want to get better, and all that kind of stuff. Check out your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of your financial freedom. You can check that out with Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or you're looking for the extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools that you need and the data all in one place. So check it out and check out Yahoo Finance today. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor. It's yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination. Again, check out yahoofinance.com, yahoofinance.com. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, being part of the show, part of the Raccoon Squad, listening every day. We appreciate each and every one of you for checking out the show. Go check out Locked On Sports Dallas. It's a YouTube channel that's 24/7 streaming all the Dallas stuff. Locked On Mavs, Locked On Rangers, Locked On Cowboys, all that stuff. Locked On Sports Dallas on YouTube or the Amazon Fire TV app. We're here with Tim Cato of The Athletic. We're talking about things that have to change from game 1 to game 2 of the Dallas Mavericks and Thunder series. 3-point shooting. That's the thing that really did the Mavericks in. You can talk about the free throw shooting, and we will a little bit later, but it was the 3-point shooting in the third quarter. The Thunder really got hot from 3. They ended up shooting 16 of 35 from the game. That's 46%. They're not going to do that again, we hope, in game 2. But you have guys like
best
Jalen
3-point
Williams.
shooting team in the NBA.
They are. You give them the chances, and they're going to get them. So I think the real key in this one is you just can't give them the chances, right? You've got to really – the same way that they kind of sold out the 3 in the Clippers series to stop Harden, you kind of have to sell out for the 3 to stop the Thunder from getting them. I mean, Isaiah Joe, 2 of 3. And I almost said Andrew Wiggins. Aaron Wiggins, 3 of 4. Cason Wallace, 2 of 4. Jalen Williams got 1 of the 2 that he shot. Like, those role players, you really have to kind of sell out for those guys to not get those shots.
Can I ask a really dumb question? Andrew and Aaron Wiggins are not related, right?
You really have me second guessing that right at this very
I've
moment.
I've never known, and it's always been not something. I believe they're not related, but it's always been something, right? But it's always been something that's like it's been a curiosity, but it's never been enough that I've actually typed it into Google.
Or isn't Andrew Wiggins is Mitchell Wiggins? Like, he's related to him, right? Like, who played in the NBA. And so are they all related to him?
I mean, am I related to Kelvin Cato? That's a question I get a lot.
That is
all the time, actually.
Are you?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah. I can answer this if you look this up, because I think it's time for me to know for sure. I'm gonna talk about the 3-point shooting. So one thing that worries me.
You haven't done a 23andMe about you and Kelvin Cato?
I think if you look at a photo of him and a photo of me, I think it's pretty clear. I don't think we need to spend money on that. I'm worried, Nick. I'm worried. Dallas.
This is a hard thing.
In game 1, I was really impressed with the way that they were able to maintain their rim protection and the way that they walled off the rim. This is something that coming into the series, I was starting to get. I just kept looking at this team, and I looked at what Dallas was good at. We all talked about how good Dallas was after the All-Star break, after the trade deadline. And we looked at that one little blip. They lost 5 of 6. Remember that 5 of 6 stretch? One of it was a Max Strus impossible shot. 3 of the 5 teams that they lost to was Indiana twice and the Boston Celtics. Losing to the Boston Celtics, that's fine. They're Boston. Losing to Indiana, people said that's just a bad matchup. Do you know what's in common about those 2 teams? They both have 5-out offenses. They both play shooting centers. And so I kept looking at Dallas, and I kept looking at what Dallas did that made them so good defensively as the series wore on, as the season wore on. after PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford got here. And I do think this team is really good when they have one player they can help off of, whether it's a traditional center, whether it's a player that you're going to dare to shoot. One other game that they allowed a lot of points was that huge comeback against the Houston Rockets. And I don't know if it actually helped them that Amen Thompson, got ejected from that game early on. Obviously, the team was rolling a little bit. But once Amen Thompson got ejected from that game and Şengün was out with his ankle injury, that was a 5-out team, and they allowed a 120-plus offensive rating to the Rockets. I was worried about the defense coming in, and Oklahoma City had a really good offensive night. Dallas did a pretty effective job at limiting them from the rim. I thought that their rim protection, their ability to contest and just restrict shots in that area was decent. And if if that's going to come at the expense of giving up some threes, and I thought in the third quarter, in the fourth quarter, those were some tough threes. Some of them are really tough ones. This is a good shooting team. I just don't know if this team is going to have the same ability to limit threes in the same way they did against the Clippers. I hate to say it, but that's my mildly pessimistic thought just about how the defense was, because I thought what they did at the rim was actually really impressive compared to the regular season where they did struggle in these situations.
Well, SGA and Jalen Williams are going to take those mid-range shots too. So it's like, okay, you sell out the three, and then you give them the shot that they kind of want. It's like, okay, you're picking your poison at a certain point. But Giddey was the matchup I kept watching. Is who's going to guard Giddey, and they put Luka on him at first, and then they kind of put Gafford or Lively on him, and then just let him alone in the corner and just let him do whatever he wants. And then Daigneault benched him, which he's done the whole season. It's not like he's been forcing Giddey to close games and forcing Giddey to be in the lineup all the time. He benched him, and he benched him for the guys that I just mentioned, Cason Wallace, the not related to Andrew Wiggins, Aaron Wiggins, and Isaiah Joe.
Okay, you did look this up, and it's confirmed. No relation.
From a fan-cited article that says that they are not related. That's my source.
Okay, thank you. I was very sure that was the case, but it was just like there's always something in the back of my head that I just wasn't fully sure.
Yeah, so I don't think they're related. I don't know that Aaron Wiggins is related to Mitchell Wiggins, who is related to Andrew Wiggins, but they're gonna get those shots. I mean, they've really struggled against shooting bigs, like you said, and so, but the percentage has got to change. They've at least got to limit the Thunder from shooting 46% from three. That's the thing that I think has got to change, and so that's the one thing I think the Mavericks really need to focus on. Another thing I think they need to focus on is the bigs finishing strong. This was something that Luka talked about in his postgame presser. I was really fascinated to hear Luka's answer on this and how he was pretty open about him talking to Gafford and Lively about them finishing strong. And this is what he said after the game.
Yeah, I think both D-Live and Gaff, have a lot of reservation. They just need to, I think we talk about playing off two legs and just go dunk it. If Chad's going to be up there, there's going to be a small down, and he just needs to, they both need to go and dunk that.
Watching on video, and if you've seen that clip, Luka at the end kind of smirks a little bit at the end of that, oh man, that's just what they got to do. They got to go dunk it. But they do, both those guys. You could see Gafford early on. He tried some extra stuff. Taking one dribble to the rim. Lively, I felt like it was really reserved and really timid in some of the attempts that he took. But there's going to be a small down there. If Chet is not in the game, or if they've got the switch that Luka wants or the switch that Kyrie wants, there's going to be a small on those guys, and they do have to finish strong. And I thought that was really interesting that Luka actually answered in the way that he did, talking so candidly about those two guys.
So Gafford talked in the locker room after the game, and I asked him about this. I asked him, so Oklahoma City did a really good job taking away the alley-oops. There's one alley-oop in the game. It came from Derrick Jones Jr. driving, and he tossed it to Gafford. So
Gafford had a full 15 seconds to point at the rim, go to the rim, and then still finish it, where it was slow motion. It felt like.
Yeah, really good play. And Derrick Jones Jr. was fantastic in game one. He was excellent.
Yeah, he was.
So what Daniel Gafford got, and Lively as well, they consistently got catches from the 10 to 15 foot range. And like Luka said, Chet was pulled out. Chet was crashing back, and he was trying to affect the play. but these are centers who were looking at the rim, and they had one small, maybe a bigger small, maybe a J-Dub, who is a very capable defender, but they're looking at a smaller player at the rim. So Gafford was upset after the game, not emotional, but like he was clearly someone who felt like he should have hit far more of the shots than he did. One thing he talked about was just the patience and the ability to take a dribble. He thought that there's times that he should have taken one more dribble. And I believe I could find his quote. It's an article on The Athletic, but a lot of those rollouts was a term that he used, should have been dunks. He thought that if he just waited a beat, put the ball down, position himself, that was a situation where he could just go up and he could just slam it. I think he's right to an extent. I think Oklahoma City did a good job. And I think if you're catching, in that 10-foot range, it's not an automatic 2 points. But I do think Daniel Gafford, who was a player who's, hit 33 consecutive shots, who is the NBA's field goal percentage leader, is someone who can do that. Lively's instinct is to pass it out. And I think in some situations, if he's making the right kick out pass, that's also okay. Because when Lively's catching in that situation, that means everybody's collapsing on him. Now, the thing is, sometimes he would throw it out and find someone who was kind of open. Sometimes he would throw it out and would pass it between two players and it would go right out of bounds. That was one of the Mavericks' last turnovers. So Lively needs to be better about that. But finishing in that situation consistently, that's a way that you can beat the defense. Making the right passes to an open shooter, that's also a way to beat the defense in those situations. I thought both centers and their respective skill sets, their respective ways they like to play those situations, I thought both of them needed to be better.
Yeah, there was a moment where Gafford got fouled on a drive, and then as soon as he gets fouled, he turns around, and Luka is about at half court, and then comes up to him, and he's like doing the motion where he's like, take the one dribble and finish strong at that point. And you just felt like that even during the game, and then Luka saying that afterwards, I felt was a very interesting point. I'm curious to see how both of the centers react to those smaller guys depending on him in the paint.
Luka usually isn't that like kind of blunt about his other teammates' performances. And again, I don't think he was criticizing them. He was just being honest. But I agree that kind of stuck out to me as well, that Luka, just kind of said that he's right. And it was constructive criticism, but it did stand out.
What else stood out to me was Kyrie talking about how this game was officiated. And that's another thing that has to change is the amount of fouls and the free throw shots, especially in the first half that the Thunder got. What did Kyrie say about that? We'll hear from him coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. You know that if you like to get back with your friends and you like to get back at them, you can use Monopoly Go to get at them. You can use all kinds of stuff in Monopoly Go, play with them, and then you know that you can build up each other's boards, and then you can fight them. You can smash their buildings, heist their vaults, things like that. Super fun. You can use teamwork with them, or you can play against them and try to beat them. You can do all kinds of stuff with Monopoly Go. Team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together, build up each other's boards. There's more you can do when you win together. Awesome prizes you can unlock. Use Monopoly Go right now. There's always new timed events or things to help you win big, massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench. Go download it now, free on the Google Play or the App Store. Again, download the Monopoly Go app on the Google Play or the App Store. It's Monopoly Go. Game on. All right, Tim Cato, we're talking about things that have to change from game one to game two. We've talked about the turnovers. We talked about PJ Washington's foul trouble. We talked about the bigs being more aggressive with Luka's quote. And there was something else that caught my attention in post-game pressers. It was this quote that Kyrie had about the fouls and about how you can guard Shai Gilgeous-Alexander without fouling him. And Kyrie was very candid about this. And let's hear from Kyrie.
I mean, again, I'm going to show my respect to Shai first, and he's a great player. But tonight in the first half, there wasn't really a rhythm for a lot of players out there. It was a lot of slow down, watch free throws be taken, and adjust to the way the game was being called. It felt like the game was being called like a regular season game tonight. That's just my perspective. I don't speak for anybody else. I don't want to get anybody else in trouble. That's just my perspective. I think that it was ref like a regular season game because we come off a very physical series against LA Clippers, and then we have some of these fouls that are called, and some of them may be fouls, right, or a majority of them. But I think when you're out there as a competitor and you just want the flow of the game to feel like the playoffs and the physicality is up there, it just feels a lot better. But again, it's all about adjustments. It's really just about continuing to stay positive through some of the runs that they make and also being mature about who we're going against. They're a good team. They've shown it all year. They have a starting five that has a plus-minus through the roof, one of the top defenses. So, again, we're going to give them credit, but we got to come in game 2 ready and prepared.
Thing when it's fans watching a game or like us watching a game where I can be biased, where it's like I never think that the Mavericks make fouls, and then I always think that the fouls that aren't called against the Mavericks are so egregious and all that. But like when a player, especially Kyrie, who does not argue with the refs, he is like he's the opposite of what Luka does a lot of the time, where he does not argue, and when he does argue, you're like, okay, I'm going to listen to you because there's something different in this game. When he says that it felt like a regular season game, that really perked up my ears. I really found that was interesting. I think if the Minnesota Timberwolves played the same kind of defense they played against the Nuggets in their game 2, played in this game of game 1 of Mavs Thunder, they all would have fouled out, and it felt so different. And it was interesting to hear like a player, especially Kyrie, call that out.
I think he's right for the first half. I thought the first half was atypical. It was an aberration from how the playoffs have been called. Quite frankly, I think the regular season, like we all talked about this, like the emphasis on the officiating changed somewhere around late January, early February. And so people were saying like this felt like a regular season game. No, this felt like a January game.
Yeah,
and that's a difference. The play that really stuck out to me was Dereck Lively. J-Dub, Jalen Williams, driving to the rim, and Dereck Lively went up with the verticality. It's possible he was leaning a little to the left, to the right. That has not been called on the Dallas Mavericks. That specific play, and it was a very late whistle at that. That specific play is the backbone of what has made Dallas so good. And I have not seen that whistled on them in, quite frankly, maybe months. And that really stuck out to me. This is not quite to the point, but one funny thing, I really appreciate that you brought up the Tony Brothers Jumbotron thing on your podcast.
Had you seen that before? I had not seen that before.
I don't think I've ever seen a Jumbotron highlight a referee. I agree. I don't think I've ever seen that before. Did you? I think I'm halfway through. You were about to get to that. I'm not sure I finished that episode. Did you talk about a smirk?
Oh yeah, where he gets booed,
yeah.
And then he's like, he hears this boo, and he's like looking off in the distance, and then he looks up and realizes it's him, and then just like smirks at the camera.
Yeah, he's just like a little,
he's
just like a little angel. Okay, so kind of like that. The one funny thing about that verticality call, it was a late whistle. Lively was really upset. So Lively's reaction, his emotions, they lead him beyond the rim, kind of like to that well, where players can run out. And so he kind of gets to that little passageway right behind the basket, and he's just venting. And then all of a sudden he looks in front of him, and it's just Thunder fans who are berating him. And he realized that he turns right around because he's not going to be angry in front of Thunder fans who are going to, saying whatever they want, saying whatever they're saying in that situation. I'm not suggesting for all I know, it was probably just good sportsmanship, like taunting, as a fan would do, but he turns right back around and then he does the rest of his venting on the court. So I just thought that was a little funny thing. And, I didn't see anything, that the Thunder did, the Thunder fan base did that was, not appropriate or anything like that. They have a very good, very loud. You talked about it. I heard it.
Very loud.
It's a really fun atmosphere there. That play really stood out to me. I will say, I don't think the officiating affected this game. Dallas only had
you don't think it affected it at all? You don't think it affected it at all?
I don't think it affected the result.
Okay.
Is that fair?
But like
it was
like the second quarter, the way that they were calling the second quarter changed the way the Mavs played defense the rest of that quarter, and then even in the third quarter. And so then I think that did affect the game.
I'm someone who doesn't really talk about officiating hardly ever. And I did. I said that I thought it wasn't. I think the Mavericks are right to feel like the first half was inconsistent and unfair. Not just inconsistent, but inconsistent in a big picture way, not in a small picture. This is, a weird refereeing crew. I thought it was inconsistent with overall the shift in refereeing, how it's gone this, over the course of the league. Like I said, that specific play,
first quarter to second quarter, I felt like it was inconsistent. Going back and watching it, I was like, they're not calling fouls on these things in the first quarter, and they did in the second quarter. It's weird.
I guess I just look at, Oklahoma City had 28 free throws, Dallas had 25. I think at the end of the game, you have to look. You can look at officiating and say that needs to be better, and that might have kept the game closer. The argument you're making with officiating, I think, if you're singling that out for one of the major reasons, not the only, but one of the major reasons Dallas lost is you're making an argument, if that's your argument, that Dallas should have been up 10 or 15 at halftime, and then could have been able to survive that lead even when everything happened in the second half that it did. So I would like to see the second half of officiating. I'd like to see the consistency of what we've been seeing. I'd like to see that verticality be verticality, because that's what it's always been over the past few months. I don't highlight it as one of the top 2 or 3 issues. I just think it's one of many things that contributed to what was ultimately a 22-point final margin.
Yeah, and all of this undercuts the big point of yesterday's episode, the post-game show, is that Luka has to be better, right? Like, that's all of it is dependent on that, is that if he's not better, and if he's not better than he was in game 1, they don't win the series. They're really just not. We already talked about that yesterday, me and Slightly did, so I didn't want to bring it up today as much, because there's other things that happened in this game too. The Mavs had a chance. They were close in the third quarter. Like, there was they had a shot in this game, even with Luka playing as badly as he did. For Luka's standards. But those are the things that I think the Mavericks have to change. Go check that out. Go check out all the stuff on The Athletic from Tim Cato. And ironically, go check out the Only Mavericks podcast, which is Tim Cato's show.
It's not ironic. You're a video show.
Okay. It's on video. If you're listening on the podcast, just close your ears for the last 15 seconds or so. Go check out that on. Thanks, Tim Cato, for checking out for hanging out with me on the show today.
I have one last question for you.
Go for it.
Did you bring a ring light? You're very well lit.
Do you like it?
And
no, this is my hotel room. I've got multiple different kinds of light. There's warm here. There's cool, warm, cool. I don't know how this worked out, but I found the right lighting.
We were talking about me being self-conscious that I don't have a cool podcast background. I think I'm just bad. This is the desk in my hotel room. Maybe it's just bad. I turned on a light behind me, but your face is very well lit, and mine is just half in shadows. I've been looking at it this whole time. There's no situation. This doesn't make it better. I look terrifying there. So I don't know what the answer is, but you did a better job than me.
I'll give you one secret, is that my table can move, so I can move anywhere I want. So I was able to get the exact right lighting. So that worked out really well.
Okay, well, I have a travel budget, but we can't afford, the bougie hotels like that. I didn't realize that you were at the
with the table on wheels, with the desk on wheels in my hotel room.
I was about to make a very good topical joke, but I can't remember what the really tall tower in Oklahoma City is called.
The one that they're building.
No, that one is insane.
That one's wild. Everyone here is there's no way that's going to happen, but they think it's going to happen. Apparently, the Thunder are going to have offices in it too, so that could be.
Devon. I was going to say Dexon, the Devon Tower.
The Devon Tower.
It's the one that currently exists. Yeah, so Nick is staying on the top floor of the Devon Tower, just overlooking everybody like the Eye of Sauron.
With a spotlight in my face.
The peasantry that is the New York Times, we can't afford stuff like that.
Yeah, right. That's right. There you go. Guys, thanks for listening to Locked On Mavs. Peace out. Boom. Oh, my God. The Devon Tower.
The Devon Tower.